Hi, all. Welcome to Tea Time. I'm Dr. T, and today, instead of drinking a hot tea, I'm actually just drinking some kombucha, fermented tea. Same idea, but cold and kind of sat and got bubbly. Um, so today, what I want to talk about is connection. Um, at the core of so much of what I study and look at and try to understand is based in disconnection. But today, the conversation is actually going to be around being a connected parent. And the reason that I'm doing this is I was prepping for a parent workshop, and part of this conversation is really, what does it look like to be a connected parent and an appropriately connected parent. And so I just figured, I am spending some time with this, and I really just kind of want to wrap my mind around it. So, why not do some tea time? So, to be connected, now, if we think of connection for a parent, there's kind of a spectrum, right? Which means ultimately there's extremes, right? So you can go for on one side or the other. It's a possibility, and it's something I see very often when I see youth who are truly struggling, specifically in substance use, depression, suicidality. But on one side, what you'll have as far as an extreme is over involvement, intrusion, enmeshment. And then on the other side, you have criticism and rejection. So, kind of the optimal connection is somewhere in the middle. Okay, you don't want to go to an extreme, and so what does it look like though? And so there was a kind of a term deemed by a few child psychologists, and they deemed this or stated this term as warmth, right? So this idea of warmth. And then they had to operationalize the term, right? Because in an academic setting, when you're talking research, if you have a term, it has to be operationalized. We have to be able to define it, know what it means, kind of have some spectrum of measurement around it. And so we're going to talk a bit about what this concept of warmth means, which directly connects to connection. And so if we think of what's considered good warmth, I'm not a huge fan of binary terms, but just for the sake of ease. Now, this type of warmth, which would consider kind of the appropriate type of warmth and connection, it involves acceptance, understanding, and investment. Now, when we speak of acceptance, okay, this is like true deep acceptance. This means I may not like my son's piercings. I may not like my daughter's tattoos. I may not like your lifestyle choices. But in spite of any disappointments, any disagreements, the essence of your child remains the same. Right? They are still your child, and you still accept them for the fact that they are your child, right? Um, and as far as disappointments are concerned, that is something to really avoid as far as when we're talking about kind of good connection and nice warmth, being a warm, connected parent. Disappointment doesn't work as a tactic. Disappointment is a great way to keep your kids from talking to you. And so if you decide, to say, I'm disappointed in you. A child equates that as, I am a disappointment. And that can become the narrative for their life. That can be the mantra, right? That core piece of how they understand who they are, because you as a parent give them the understanding originally of who they are. Your approval, disapproval really helps them make sense of themselves. And so, if you say, I'm disappointed in you, then they say, well, my parents think I'm a disappointment, so I must be. And often they'll find things in their lives to kind of support that statement. And we can imagine where that might go. So there's a difference between saying that and saying, like, I'm disappointed in how you handled this situation. I really believe you could have done it differently, right? A disappointment in an action is different than a disappointment in a being. So just a piece to state there. Now, things to understand, of course, and when we talk about acceptance, is that our children are a work in progress. They're going to be their entire lives. We as human beings are a work in progress. There's no perfection. It's not possible. And so true acceptance, very true acceptance, is the ability to love our children even as they swing back and forth between attachment and separation, right? Alienation and commitment, right? So this swing back and forth between I really want to be around you and I really love you, parent, versus you're the worst person in the world and I want nothing to do with you, okay? Because that has nothing to do with you as a parent. It has to do with these kids really trying to understand, well, who am I? Where do I stand out? How do I individuate? How do I become me? How do I become independent and stand on my own 2 feet? And sometimes it's just a part of the journey, right? But no matter what, you accept them for who they are. You accept them as your child. But acceptance is not enough, right? You can't just accept them. You also have to have a deep understanding. You need to give them an opportunity to connect with you without any distortion and without any projection. That longing, right, to be connected that way is universal. Every single person wants that. And so really, who is the best person to do that as a parent for a child? Okay, so when I say without distortion or projection, right? So I'm not distorting my understanding of you based on my experience, based on what I know, based on my feelings, emotions, etc. And I'm also not projecting me onto you, right? I see myself in you. How often does this happen? And I want to keep you from making the mistakes that I made. Okay, you don't know that they're going to do that, but making sure they have a clear path to explain and have you truly listen and understand is so crucial to having a real connected relationship, something that they can come back to always, and also a place where they feel comfortable coming and talking when things are really hard, because we want our kids to come and talk to us. We want them to feel like they can say things to us. But if we don't listen to them and they don't feel heard, it's not going to happen. If we condemn them, tell them they're going to disappoint us, they're not going to come talk to us. And if we're not open and honest, they're not going to talk to us, right? If we pretend we're perfect, not going to happen, right? Because, oh, my parents are perfect. I'm not. I can't talk to them about mistakes. Okay. So really being careful. And then, of course, being committed, right? Children just need to feel protected, not simply confronted. Now, a really interesting piece about this connection, right? It can go too far one way or the other. This is a really difficult piece to balance, is that connection. How connected do I need to be? How involved do I need to be? But a really interesting piece of data from research is that it's shown that a father's warmth and acceptance actually has a greater impact on predicting academic success, social competence, and low incidence of conduct problems. So, and the reason this is kind of put that way is because it's felt as if there's not as much time spent with father. And so the moments that you get, the moments of connection, are just prized pieces. And so having a father's warmth and acceptance is really crucial in this child's life. Now, here's the really important piece, right? So this is really takes a lot of energy to do all the time, to truly be present, to really listen, to fully accept. It's really easy when we've got, a 3-year-old who's just adorable, we want to just bite their cheeks. Okay, there's just this kind of endearing piece where we can kind of put up with a lot of things. But as they grow up, right, they're middle school, high school, adults, it becomes harder and harder. But we still have to maintain that level of acceptance. And it becomes a really difficult task. But one piece to really take in is some days we can't do it. We cannot be fully present. And so the thing that's beautiful about that moment, one is you have an ability to take care of yourself. 2, you have the ability to model what it looks like to take care of yourself. And then 3, you have the ability to show what healthy boundaries look like, right? Because so many of these youth that I know and work with, they don't even understand the concept of a boundary. What is that? What does that mean? Especially internal boundaries, right? Where you can say things to me and I don't take it personally because I know it doesn't actually have to do with me. It has to do with you. And that doesn't happen often. Very often, everything that's said is taken on as truth. And so if you're not able to be that warm parent, okay, at that moment in time, you have the ability to model emotional responsibility, right? By letting your child know, you know what, today, not the day. I am, really overwhelmed with work. I'm kind of exhausted. I'm not going to be able to be as engaged as I want to be in this conversation. So can we talk about this tomorrow? I would really love to come back to the issue you're having with your friend tomorrow, if that's okay, right? If it's so pressing and they really just need you to talk right there, I guarantee you can find the gumption, the strength, the energy to have the conversation. But if it's something that can take a moment, right? And it allows them the space also to really reflect and maybe think about it themselves, right? And then you can check in and say, all right, I'm ready now. Let's talk about that. Do you still need to talk? You want to talk to me about the process you went through? What's going on? How did you handle it when I couldn't talk to you right away? So this is a really important piece of this is being truly honest about where you are, especially emotionally. And they go, wow, that's what I'm supposed to do. If I really can't do this, I need to just step back for a minute and really figure out what I need first before I can kind of be in any type of relationship and connection with someone else. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to be a warm, connected parent, you just need to make sure that your child knows that if you had any choice in any child in the whole world, they were the child you were going to choose. They're the only option. You would never take anybody else. And whereas I believe most parents truly believe that a lot of times the things that we say and do counteract that, right? You could be better at this sport, right? You could be smarter than that. A B isn't good enough. I mean, whatever it is, there's many ways to contradict. And your child needs to know that you know they are the only child for you and you would never pick anybody else. So let's think about the opposite. So if we were talking about kind of this good warmth, let's go to the bad warmth. And what this looks like is over-involvement, intrusion, and parental neediness. So of course, sometimes our child's behavior will dictate that we have to insert ourselves fully into their lives. And so there's a clear distinction there. But more frequently than not, we drift into their space. We insert ourselves into their lives because of our fear of uncertainty about loss of connection. Right? We don't want to lose connection with them. We don't want them to hate us. We don't want them to run away. Whatever it is, there's this fear that forces us to insert ourselves into their lives. That doesn't work. Because really what's going on is we have these perceived threats of contemporary society. And these perceived threats are actually causing us to have the same response, right? We're eliciting this same response as if our child was exposed to polio and there was no vaccine. And that just is fascinating. And if we think of fear, right, fear has this like huge impact in parenting, right? If you are anxious, if you're overprotective, if you're over solicitous, if you're intrusive, and which has become very commonplace, okay, it actually diminishes your children's self-efficacy and autonomy, right? It makes them hesitant to approach the world because you as a parent are portraying the world as something that's too dangerous. So they become kind of overly dependent on you. They go to what's safe, and they won't go and try new and challenging experiences, which is what they need to do in order to understand who they are, what they like, what is it that they're going to be, right? The only way to do that is to go through all of these experiences, and the way to build resiliency, right? The way to build this efficacy, which is the belief that I can do something. It is the belief that I can get past this hurdle. It is believing. Agency is the action, right? Efficacy, I believe I can do this. Agency, I'm going to actually do something about it. And autonomy is I can be by myself. I can stand on my own 2 feet. If we think of being parents, right, the idea, which may sound sad, is ultimately we kind of want to work ourselves out of the job. Which is not a job. I understand that. But we want to work ourselves out of the job, as in we really want it so that our kids want us around, but they don't need us. Right? They can go out into the world. They can be faced with all the things they're going to face in life, good, bad, ups, downs, successes, failures, all the binary terms, right? They're going to face all of these, but the thing is we've given this great toolbox, right? The way we connect determines their toolbox. And so they're able to move through it, step up, and then they're willing to talk to us about it, share their life with us. And so fear keeps us from allowing this to happen, because then we actually have to watch them fall down. We have to watch them struggle. But we can still be there and support. Okay. So over involvement, let's talk about that for a minute. So it's not just simply like more healthy involvement. Okay. Rather, over involvement actually gets in the way of child development, right? It's unnecessary involvement. It's those moments of like, they forgot to wash the dishes, so then we wash them. There's an unmade bed, so we straighten it. We edit our child's writing assignment. Okay. That is over involvement, too much. Intrusion is always unhelpful, always, because it invades the psychological space of our child and it blurs appropriate and necessary boundaries between parent and child. Okay. It is invariably to the child's disadvantage. Okay. This is moments like listening in on your child's phone calls. Okay. Repeating a complaint about a classmate that our child made to us in confidence. Right? Anything our child makes to us in confidence, we just decide that we're going to go tell everybody about it. Encouraging a child to take an honors class or do something by making them feel guilty or ashamed. I will state this very clearly. Promoting guilt and shame works against progress. No question. There's a ton of research backing this up. Okay. And then more importantly, what it does is it weakens the ties between child and parent. The more we shame, the more that we guilt, the more that we pressure, the more we put unrealistic expectations in front of us, the farther our child gets from us. Because they don't want to disappoint us. They don't want to. You mean the world to them. Children have no option but to love. And so they don't want you to feel like they failed. And so if those are the options in front of them, then they're going to distance themselves from you because they just don't want you to know that they can't be what you want them to be. Okay. So both intrusion and over-involvement prevent the development of skills our children need to be successful, right? If you think of basic skills, the ability to be a self-starter, right? The willingness to engage in trial and error learning. I mean, I've been a science teacher for 12 years, and I can't even explain to you the amount of fear I have in students because if I don't tell them exactly what's going to happen or how to do it, they're terrified to fail, even though that's the whole premise of science. And it really comes from this kind of grounding, this base, this understanding that like, I can't fail. That's not good. That's good. I hear failure is bad, right? The ability to delay gratification, instant gratification is so present and prominent in our society today. And we need to learn and understand what it means to delay gratification, to tolerate frustration, to show self-control, to learn from mistakes, right? Making a mistake and not beating myself up and telling myself I'm a horrible person, but going, okay, I made a mistake. What can I learn from this? And how do I move on and try to not make sure I don't make that same mistake again? And then to be flexible and a creative thinker. Okay. And creativity is this majorly underrated skill. And I'm just not gonna, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because creativity could be talked about like all by itself for a really long time. And I feel like I've already been talking a long time. But if we don't allow creativity, right, then we're not able to think outside the box, right? How many times have we come across a problem, an issue, something we have in our life, and we really have to think of some way to figure it out. And we have to be incredibly creative about it because it's something we've never dealt with before. I'm not quite sure how to handle this. And so you have to be able to, right, be able to be creative. And so what happens is the larger the toolbox we give, our children, the larger toolbox we have, the more creative we can be and the more outside the box we can be, right? The more likely we are to come up with effective solutions. So whenever we prematurely solve problems for our children, we actually deprive them of the opportunity to come up with novel solutions that allow them to kind of add another tool to the toolbox, right? Oh, I went through this and I had to do this to figure it out. And so here's a tool. Every time we go through that, we figure out a new way to do it. Maybe we start to pull different pieces together and we make a new big tool out of all these mini tools. But ultimately just kind of get this major arsenal. And warmth, this idea of warmth often kind of slides into unhealthy dependency. When we turn our children, when we turn to our children, right, for the loving connections missing in our own adult relationships. Very often as adults in our relationships, there's too much pressure and too little intimacy. And when I say intimacy, I don't mean like just kind of the sexual part of life. Intimacy is like being able to be your real, true, honest self with somebody and have them accept you fully for that. And so that is very, very rare in relationships, especially adult relationships. And so often if that is missing, then you kind of turn to your kids to get your needs met. And this very often leads to a clear collapse of boundaries. That concept of enmeshment. I need you to survive. I need you to feel better about myself. And so really making sure that you can stand on your own 2 feet, you have your own community, you're addressing your own traumas and issues and frustrations and whatever it is, addressing them, noticing them, being aware of them, and ensuring that it's not being translated to your child. Of course, we make mistakes. Of course, we're going to kind of falter back and forth between different types of parenting styles. It is the awareness. It's the willingness to pay attention and the willingness to admit we're wrong that truly sets us apart as a nice, warm parent. Warmth, this concept of warmth ultimately protects our children from psychological trouble. Enmeshment and intrusion invite trouble into the household. Okay. Children are incredibly remarkable when it comes to reading the needs of parents. They haven't kind of stifled their intuition. They kind of haven't shut their inner knowing off. And so they know what you need. And at the end of the day, because they love you, they're willing to do anything for you. And they're willing to give up their own well-being to take care of you. So if you're not taking care of yourself, your child is going to feel the need to do that. And then they're not going to take care of their own self. And what that means is during major developmental periods, they are not spending the time building their strength, their autonomy, their love for themselves, their understanding of what they like and what they don't like. All of these pieces, because they're too worried about taking care of you. Ultimately, when we think of warmth, we think of a good goal of parenting is autonomy and not dependency. So at the end of the day, what we want to make sure we're doing is connecting appropriately, right? Being accepting, open, being involved, but not forcing ourselves into their lives. Just allowing them space if that's what they need, if that is appropriate for the time in their life. And having true, open, real conversation early, often, about the hard things. Show that you're a parent that can talk to them about things you don't want to hear from them, because you care more about them making sure they have a safe place to go and find support, as opposed to finding dependency somewhere else. And then I think last piece is the concept of praise. Recently, there's just kind of been this big self-esteem movement. I mean, the past 30 years or something. And realistically, what children need is a sense of self, and not to inflate the sense of self. Because very often what happens is if we just do too much praise, as opposed to just warmth, right? Warmth is I'm being truly connected and being truly present, but there's really healthy boundaries. I'm really making sure we kind of know where we can go, where we can stop. But if it's excessive praise, right, there's a difference between being appreciative and being entitled. And excessive praise typically goes for entitled, because they're like, well, obviously I'm the best at everything, so why do I need to clean my room? And so just being really, really careful, especially superficially with our praise. And typically superficially, it's like, oh, I'm trying to make this about warmth and connection. But if we go deeper level, it's more about control and compliance. It's just, the idea is that we praise like a kid for getting, the best grades or something. And really what we're showing is that our love and acceptance is conditional on outstanding performance. It ignores kind of the critical aspects of learning. So just being really careful with these things. And again, I'm not stating that any of this is easy, but just some pieces to understand and to kind of mull over. If you have any questions, you can leave some comments or reach out. I hope this was helpful in any way, shape, or form, and I hope you have a great day. Peace.